Hello YouTube, my name's Keith from Hi-Res Digital. I've been working on some Gutenberg theming today for a client, and I was trying to build I guess it's a bit like a kind of timeline type layout, like you can see on the screen here. That this is the end result of what I ended up putting together. So it's this kind of row of icons with the numbers 1 to 6. And I was building that, and I basically did it all in pretty much native Gutenberg and CSS. You'll see in a second that the animated icons are a different block, but the actual stepped block, as it were, like the numbers, that's actually all CSS. And I thought it was quite a cool demonstration of the power of certain CSS properties, but also just what you can do with Gutenberg practically out of the box as a theme developer, rather than going in and, for example, building your own custom block in this instance. So I just wanted to really show you how it was done. So this is what we're aiming for. We're going to start with this over here. So we're going to start with this. Let me just move. I've got a little thing in the way. Start with this, so you can see we've got this row. It's got a line through it. I'll show you why, because what I've actually done is I've created column styles to achieve this effect. I'll come back to that, but I'm basing this off a previous column style and just augmenting it slightly further. So that's what we're going for. Let me just ditch the pop-up for now, and we can really get started. So to get started, let me show you what I've done, how I've put this together from like a basic Gutenberg point of view, and then we can go from there. So currently I don't have the back end, the editor styled like the theme. I'm kind of saving that headache for the end of the project. But what I've done here is I've created let me click in. Let me just move that a little bit. Cool. And then, so I've got a columns block here, and it's set to 6 columns. So we've got the 6 columns, and then within each column, I've got an animated icon block. Now this is that is a custom block, and a heading block, and I've set that to an H4. In this particular one, I've got a paragraph as well. I was just testing out how it would react to more elements being added to the column. So I'll just keep that. I'll keep that in for now. But essentially, that's it. So if I click back to the parent columns block here, again, the backend editor styles aren't loaded in at the minute. So I do have 4 styles. They're all show the same preview. They are actually all different. In fact, no, you won't be able to see it update live in the editor, so there's no point in clicking through them. But the ones I'm interested in at the minute are grid and timeline. Now, if I just scroll up the page a little bit, in fact, I'll do it on this page. These are the grid ones. So this is what I started with. So these are my grid columns, and all I've done for the grid columns is basically add this horizontal line underneath the first element of every column, and I've pulled it out to stretch to meet the vertical grid lines. Now the vertical grid lines actually carry on throughout this whole page. This is just a test page for a column block, but you can see those vertical grid lines are actually persistent through the whole design, so they're not specific to a block. But what I did want to do is just to make sure that these grid lines were pulled out to meet the horizontal lines were pulled out to meet the vertical lines. So all that to say that the horizontal line that you see here is actually pulled through from a previous style. And let's jump into some code just to show you that. So the very first thing I want to do, in case you haven't done this before, is show you just how to create a block style. Luckily this is super simple. So if I just jump into my code, I have in my theme a file called EditorJS. And in this file, I have some functions. Basically, I think for the most part, I'm only using this to register and unregister block styles. So exactly what we're talking about. So here I've got, for example, I'm removing the default and rounded image block styles. So unregistered block style, which block is it? It's the image core block. And which style am I unregistering? It's the default one and then the rounded one. And then in this next section here, I'm adding in my own block styles for the image block. So I'm creating a treated block style, which is actually the default, and a no effect one. So it's untreated. Maybe I should have called that one. But I guess if I'd had other effects as well, that wouldn't have made any sense. Or unstyled maybe would have been better. So going down, I've also got my own heading block styles. I've got, and here we come to my columns styles. So I've got register block style. It's a core block. It's the columns block, not column. So I'm applying it to the parent columns block, not the individual columns themselves. I'm setting up a default style, and then I've got 3 custom styles here. And the 2 that are relevant are grid and timeline. Now so you can see that's like, this is copy and paste to JavaScript. I'm not a JavaScript whiz by any means, so this was pretty easy for me to do, so hopefully it will be for you if you've got any experience with this kind of thing. I'm just going to show you if I can. I can't remember exactly where I did it. I just wanted to show you the function. Editor styles, maybe. I can't remember where it is. It's probably in there. Editor.js. Let's just look for a second. Because I'm assuming block editor, get shot. Q style sheet, that's the one. So this is a function to enqueue the correct scripts for the Gutenberg block editor. And here I'm just saying, basically, go and get that file when you're in the admin area. So that's how you do the styles. That's not really what I want to focus on today. I really want to focus on kind of the CSS I've used. So that's the only Gutenberg customization that I've done here to achieve this effect. The really cool stuff is all in CSS. So I'll just quickly show you how I've structured this. So I have a project columns SAS file, and this is where I add my project specific style. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a bit of a starter theme that I can use because I've created a new a grid framework and stuff. So I'm trying to keep project specific styles in separate partials. So I've got project-columns.scss. At the start, I just open up that I'm in a columns block, and then I say, then I've got a section here for each of the styles. This one is my gray background style, and then the grid and the timeline styles are both sharing this horizontal line, which I'll just zoom back to if I go to the so you can see the kind of, it's really light, but you can hopefully see the horizontal line here that runs along. So that is the grid style, and then the timeline style shares that exact same thing. So that's it running through the top here. So that is, just jumping back to the code, that is that code. The CSS here is having to be a little bit fancy, because what I would normally have done was just to say target the first child and add that pseudo element, so it's after here. That's how I would have done it. But Mark and I are using I can show you on the front end. Mark and I are using a slightly fancy and sometimes slightly annoying method of adding CSS. Let me see if I can show you an example of it. So yeah, this is a good example. So here's my block column. It's the first column. And the first element isn't actually my animated icon. It is this link to a CSS file. And that basically says the first time a block is used on a page, it tries to load this link. So that's why I can't use first child. It's slightly annoying, but I can't because it might be a link. So this is the workaround. So I'm saying if it's the first child and it's not a link, add that kind of bottom border, as it were. I've used a pseudo element for it, but effectively it's a pseudo element with a bottom border. So I should probably comment this. If, like I say, if it's a first child and it's not a link, create this. Or if there is a link with this, which is the first child, target the element directly after it. So that's what the plus combinator does. So that covers both use cases. So just jumping back in here, in this case there's a link, so it's going to say, if I click here and look for my after element, you'll see the CSS rule in action. So WP block columns is style grid. The first direct children of that, the direct block column children of that, and the direct children link first child after. So that's how it's targeting this div and creating the after pseudo element. Bit complex, but then you'll see why I've done that. If I go to the next one, there won't be a link because it has already been added for that block type. So there's no link this time. So I do want to target this if it's not a link. So if I click on the after here, you'll see what the highlighted section here is different. So this is just the first child, which is not a link. So it's all a bit complicated, but it works really well. And using combinators like that are actually a great way of targeting specific elements without having to add specific classes to your markup and things like that. You could argue that adding classes in this kind of case would actually be better because it's more performant. But sometimes, for example, when we're using Gutenberg, editing the markup is very difficult indeed. So that's why I've been using a lot more of this powerful CSS, like not like the plus, like first, direct descendants and just things like that. So anyway, that's kind of all relevant to what I'm doing here because it's using these fancy selectors. It's also using the pseudo elements to create graphical elements in the design. So now let's look at our timeline specific CSS. I didn't announce that I was going to be doing this, so like I wasn't expecting anybody to show up live. I'm just gonna, who's here? I've had a wave from Sam Berry, so that's really nice. Thank you, Sam, for checking in. Let me know someone's watching. If anyone else is watching, I don't know where would the stats be for that? I don't even know. If anyone else is watching, write something in the comments just to say hello, say where you're watching this, where you're from. That'd be really nice. Okay, let's jump into some CSS. Let's remind ourselves what we're trying to achieve here. So we're trying to achieve these numbers. Now the numbers actually were a bit of an afterthought for me. Initially, all I was going to do was a little graphical circle. Initially, it was going to be a solid circle in red or something like that. It's ended up looking like this, which I think actually looks really, really nice. And it's all CSS, which is really cool. So let's start from the start, pretending we're not using the numbers. In fact, scratch that. We're going to use the numbers. It's one of the most the coolest parts of this, I think. Like I say, pure CSS. So let's dig in, and we will update this as it becomes, as it starts to come together. Right, let's see where we're at. So I've got that. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is set up what is known in CSS as a counter. And a counter is just a way, I don't have loads of experience with it. This is maybe the first time I've used this in production at all. But it does what it says. We can increment a counter and use the value of that, in this case, as pseudo element content. So it's very, very cool. So I can output numbers as something is incremented. So how do we increment it? Well, the very first thing I'm going to do is kind of set up the counter by just writing this line. So counter-reset, and then the value is timeline. So timeline is like the name of the counter that we're going to use. So you can have multiple counters across your style sheets. So in this case, timeline is the name of the counter, and we're going to use that value going forward. All right, so I want to only affect the columns, the direct descendants. Let me see. Herb, good question. So Herb's just written a question saying, can I add this? I think I can publish this to the broadcast. Can you put the CSS loader outside of the block? I mean, the answer is nearly always yes. It's not the way we've done it. I don't know how we would go about that. So we do it. It is outside the block. So the way we do it is that it loads directly before the block, the first block is used. So for example, we do this for, do we do it for paragraph blocks? I think there's a handful of blocks we don't do it for. But for the group block, for example, just before the opening div of the group block, so WP block group, will output this link. So the same thing is happening here. So that style is being output directly before the animated icon block, but only on the first one that's been used. So it's a little bit tricky to like position it where it would be less problematic, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that does make sense, Herb. Of course, we could always just ditch them in the footer or something like that, but we're doing this for kind of very specific reason. We're calling it just-in-time CSS. No relation to just-in-time, the Tailwind stuff. But speaking of which, how on earth would you do any of this with Tailwind? Maybe you can. That's probably just my ignorance. Anyway, back to the show. So I want to target the direct descendants of the columns block, and I want to get the so that's how I'm going to do that. So that's what this little guy does here, or girl. So it's only going to target WP block column that are direct descendants of the columns block. So if you had nested columns, it wouldn't go any further down. Just a useful little bit of CSS. I think it probably keeps the performance a bit better as well. Okay, and then for each of the columns, I want to increment that counter. So I'm going to write counter increment, and I'm going to increment the timeline counter. So okay, so now for each of those columns, it has a new counter value associated with it, so we're going to be able to use that in a minute. Right, here's where it gets a little bit funky. So before, remember, I had this because I wanted to add something to the bottom of the first child. Messages are delayed. That's right. I wanted to add something to the first child down here. This time I want to add something to the top of the second child. I could actually probably do it the same. I think I did it a different way because I was I wanted to be able to use before and after at some point. I'm just going to do it the way I know worked for now, and then please feel free to pick it apart and say why I should be doing it a different way. But I'm going to do something similar to this, but it's going to be looking for the second child instead of the first child. So let me just start writing that in now. So I'm going to direct descendant, nth child, 2, but that isn't a link because I don't want to give the links any styles, so it's not a link, and we're doing it before. Again, I think I could have done this a different way, but it's because I didn't know what I was building to start with. So that's the one where it is the second child and it isn't a link. And then I want to use the other use case again where there is a link, so it's actually the one after the link. There's probably various ways you could write this CSS, but I've done link nth child. Link will never be the nth child too. This is interesting. I'm just looking at the code I wrote. Right, I know this works, but I've got a feeling I need to revisit this because I'm not actually sure. Live coding for you folks. And do I need the asterisks there? Bum, bum, bum. I don't think that makes any sense because the link is never the second child. I think that should link first child. Anyway, I'm going to come back to that. If there's a problem, we will see it. So let me just keep going. Okay, so the first thing we want to use our counter. So I'm going to say content. So quite often whenever I'm just using pseudo elements like before and after for graphical content, I just leave content empty, and then I can create a box, give it some borders or a background color or whatever. You can even put SVGs directly in here, not even a link to an SVG, an actual SVG, as long as it's encoded properly, yeah, it can be used in here. So I use this kind of technique all the time to provide graphical elements without having to go and add background images and things like that. Really, really useful. But this time we want to use our counter, and the counter is the timeline counter. Let's go and see what that looks like. I've got absolutely no idea. Aha! Here are our numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 columns, and our counter is working absolutely beautifully. So that's working. So now all we need to do is style it. So let's start doing that. I'm excited that just was that easy and it actually rendered nicely. Yeah, the link, I'm not going to have the link issue because I've already using that block. I've got an idea. So I'm not going to have the link issue that you saw there because the animated icon block has already been used further up the page. So the link will never be, the link tag will never be output in my timeline block, because it has already been output up here in the grid blocks. So what I'm going to do, just to force myself to fix that, I'm going to move these down the page. Gutenberg, you are still fiddly, right? Let's see if that works. I'm hoping that actually breaks it. So let's see. Saving. Apparently, live streaming always really, really slow stuff down. It's going to change the layout of the page a little bit, so I might have to find it again. Just grab a drink while I've got a chance. Ah, yes, it's broken. Don't you love it when things break when they're supposed to? Now I just need to work out why. So, I've got a feeling there's a link here. Let's go and have a look at that. Close all this down. Can you see it? Yes, you can. Here we go. So there is our link. So it's working when there is a link. It's not working when there isn't. Okay, let's jump in here. So when there is a link, so the second child, which isn't a link, if there's a link, the nth child, wowzers. Don't know about anybody else, but I am confused. So interestingly, it's added it, yeah, to that first element. And actually, I want, oh no, it is still there. They are still there. I was being an idiot. So the numbers are still here, as they should be, but this one has been punted up there. Good. So I've got a feeling if I delete that, should doesn't do anything, right? That's because it wasn't doing anything. That's fine. Let's add it back in because I know it's nearly right. So I've got a feeling it should be that. Nope. Okay. So I want to add it. If the link, let's just get rid of that. Link first child, I want to add it to the next child, right? Wow, it's not working. I'm probably missing something super basic here. Link first child plus whatever, so it's the next thing after that. Link first child. If anyone's watching, I don't think too many people are watching. If anyone's watching, you can help me out. Plus. That looks right to me. What am I missing here? Let's go and inspect this a little bit. Just get rid of that. So it's adding it to this, right? It's not telling me. And the second child is never a link. It's never a link. So that's wrong for a start. And okay, so that's, now it's back. Right, I'm just going to build this up. Sometimes I think having some broken code in front of you is worse. Yes, that second line was basically doing nothing. Okay. So just double check. Okay, so the nth child, 2, 4. I'm still a little bit confused. No, I'm not, because that is the nth child, 2. So can I if there's a link, it's the, we still want, if it's a link it won't be the second child, that's right. That's still not working. Oh my goodness, I hate live code sometimes. Right, I'm not going to fix that here on this live stream because nobody wants to watch that. And maybe you do. Maybe it is very entertaining to watch me flounder in this way. I'm sure it probably is to some people, but you're not the kind of people I want watching. So I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to make sure that that animated icon block is already loaded. And yeah, I'm going to figure that out though. I'm obviously going to have to figure that out because this is an actual website I'm building. It's not just for the sake of this channel. Let's see what happens. Right. Okay, I've cheated. It's working. Let's move on because I want to just show you how I'm going to try to achieve the rest of this. So we've got our counter incrementing, which is nice. Now I want to give it a little bit of styling. And I'm going to want to create some kind of variable. Remember what we're trying to achieve. I want to create some kind of variables around the circles, because if I'm working with circles, typically, the width and the height are going to be the same. You might want the line height to match. Etc., etc. You might want the font size to be relevant to the size of the circle, or vice versa. So I'm going to set up a variable. I'm going to do it as like a general timeline variable. I don't know where to put it. In this case, I'm just going to do timeline circle diameter. 2M, and then it can be relative to the font size, which would be quite nice. Okay, and then I'm going to say and just to start testing things out. Let's jump back to this. Didn't work. There we go. Getting somewhere. Okay. Okay, the font size I want to set because I want it to look a little bit smaller than that. Don't need that background color. That was just as like a test to see what was going on. Okay, font size, and I'm going to use a custom property. What is it? Global font size. Extra small, I think, is the one I want here. Let's see what happens, if anything. So I can update for me. Yep. So I just jumped down to the extra small. That's nice. Font size. I want to remove the bold. Font weight normal, and I want to set the color. Can't remember which spelling of grey it is, whether it's American or English. Right, let's see what's going on. Okay, And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a border. And, well, first of all, 1 pixel solid red standard debugging type border. That should compile and update. Just a second. Wow, it's really slow. Okay, so fine. We want it to be a circle. So it's border radius 50%. And we need to center this text. There's our nice circle. Okay, so the first thing, text align center. We'll center it horizontally for us, I believe. But we need to center it vertically as well. Now, because we're using, I could probably be even more clever about my variables. I could do that. I won't be too clever right now because I want to, keep it relevant. But I'll say line height 2. You could also do this with like a line height with 1 and padding of like half an M. That might actually be better. But you can see my my numbers are more centralized now. It's actually a quirk of this particular font that certain numbers sit kind of quite low. So I think that is why in my original iteration, global font, I think it was secondary. I think this font, let's just wait for that to compile in. I think this font sits slightly more, slightly more consistently on the horizontal axis, which is nice. We are getting there. Now I want to change that border to a global border. So I talked about my kind of grid lines here. So they all, I'm using that style of border all the way throughout this this project, this theme. So I've set up a custom property for that called global border, so I can just use that whenever I need to. And you can say border top and just use that custom property. So it's super, super useful. I use it all the time. In fact, that is what I think I used up here. Yeah, border bottom, global border. That is for the horizontal lines. So we're getting there. Now, the next thing I want to try to do is position this. I want it to sit really neatly aligned to the grid, if I can. I know I can because I've already done it. So I am going to, now I haven't really grouped I've tried to a little bit, my rules here that well, but you'll forgive me, won't you? So I'm going to say position absolute. For now, I'm going to just do that and see where that leaves us. Where does that put our numbers? It makes them disappear, and that is probably because I need to do something that I've forgotten to do. That's interesting, because I did not. I'm guessing they're just going to. They're there. They are there. I thought they disappeared, but they're really, really faint behind the text. They're actually there. That's fine. That's exactly where they should have gone. But what I need to do now is drag them around into position. So to do that, I'm going to use a kind of fancy line here. So we're going to use calc. And we are going to say, so I've got global, right, let me show you this. So I'm going to say -1 times a variable or custom property, And this one is called global spacing vertical. So where's that going to go? Should shift it up a bit. That is almost right, but it's not quite right. Because what I actually need to do is bring it up by half of one of those, and then bring it up by another half of the height of the circle. So I'll say timeline circle diameter is that divided by 2. Let's have a look at that on this. See what that does. Perfect. That is just perfectly aligned it along that line now, vertically. And now I need to do effectively the same thing. In fact, it's exactly the same thing horizontally, except I've got a different spacing unit horizontally. So I'm just going to grab this, copy it in here, and instead of spacing vertical, I'm going to say, and this is the beautiful thing about using variables of any kind consistently throughout a theme, is that you can kind of go to these units and you know that things are just going to like click into place. So there you go, look at that. That is absolutely beautiful looking. It is bang on where it should be, looking very precise, which is exactly what we want, especially when your client is called Precision Microdrives. All right, so I think we're nearly there. So let's just go and look and see what we were trying to achieve. So we're very, very close. The only thing I've done that's kind of extra is this additional little ring. This is a bit hacky, and I'm sure there's a better way to do it, but it's kind of another fun little bit of CSS. So I'll show you how I did it. I actually did this with box shadow. So I'm just going to say box shadow, and I need to use, as far as I know, I need to use 2 box shadows here. One of them is going to be white, which isn't ideal, and the other one is going to be the outer kind of grey one. So they're going to be centered. There's going to be no blur, but I want it to be 3 pixels outside of the border, and I want it to be white. In fact, let's just, again, for the sake of kind of demonstration and debugging, let's just build it up bit by bit. So this one should create a blue border around each of them. So that's our blue border. And then what we want to do is create another border around that. So we can list multiple box shadows. If you didn't know that, it's super cool. And you can create some really nice actual shadow effects, not just borders and things. So I could, for example, then say 6 pixels, which will create a 3 pixel band, because it'll be the 6 minus the 3 of the blue. And let's call this green. I'll save that, let that compile and inject itself into here. Probably should use different colors, but you can hopefully see a blue and a green border there. So let's do what we actually want to do here. Turn that one white. Set that to 4, so it's a single pixel, and then I'm going to use my I actually can't remember what that variable is, but RGBA. I think I can just say black 0.1. Let's see what happens. There you go, and that is that. It works. I'm pretty sure responsively it does what it needs to. Yep, once it stacks, it actually looks really good. Stacked, I think, like that. So that, I hope that demonstrated what you can do with basic Gutenberg skills, very basic Gutenberg skills, and a bit of CSS, and a little bit of kind of creativity, you can really do a lot without having to change any markup in this case, which is pretty cool. The only thing that was changed was the class that was added to the columns block via the block style. So I've actually had a lot of fun working with Gutenberg, and it's actually really made me level up my CSS skills, because you've got to think of creative ways to work around some of the problems that come with not being able to affect the markup too much. So hopefully that's shown you a few things. I think the counter system is amazing, CSS counter. So I would encourage diving into that a bit more. I think there's loads more that can do. I think you can even use like alpha characters in there as well as numerical ones. So lots and lots of cool stuff in there. Play about, have some fun. Pseudo elements are super fun. Play about with those for adding, decorative borders and things to elements. But just enjoy building WordPress themes. That is all I've got for today. Thank you very much for joining me or watching, and I'll see you next time.